Hi everyone, Salesforce integration training day 24. Now today we are going to see HttpCalloutMock methods, and how do we call the HTTP call mock interface, and what is the static resource callout mock class? Why should we use the static resource callout mock? And what are the methods that are available inside the static resource callout mock? And we will see the steps to implement a static resource callout mock in the test class. Then we'll have a differences. Now basically HTTP callout mock. So callout mock is nothing but we use the mock to test our code, especially related to the integration. Whenever we are calling, the callouts are happening through the Apex. If I wanted to test the code, because Salesforce always suggests that more than 75% code coverage. Now, whatever the test classes we have, what are the classes we have written? For that, if I wanted to write a test class, how can I test my code by writing the test classes? So basically, mock tells that mock is the one which is going to provide you the some fake callouts. Fake callouts. Using that fake callouts, we can execute the test class method in order to check our logic. So to test our callouts, to test our integration logic, use the mock callout. We use the mock callout by either implementing an interface or using the static resource. You can do it both the ways. Either you have to declare the within the Apex code by implementing the interface, or else you can also use the static resource. By using the static resource also, we can test our callouts. So mock callout is nothing but to simulate an external responses. Right? For test classes, we do not really need to call the third-party API. I can build my own mock, and for sample body, I can respond it and I can test the logic. So for testing also, we need not to call the API. So to simulate an external response, developer use a mock that returns the predefined whatever we are defining within the class. It will predefine value whenever a callout is made. Now we enable sending a fake responses when the testing HTTP callouts. So when we are testing the HTTP callouts, we do not really want to call the external third party while executing the text class code, because whenever I'm pushing the production or where in the different org, my code has to execute, my code has to have a 75% code coverage. So in that case, we write it test classes. So while pushing the changes to the another org, the test classes are executed. So whenever the test classes are executed, every time I do not want to call the actual real API. So in that case, what we can do is we can build a fake response using the HTTP callout mock. Then by using that fake response, we can test our code, the HTTP code. Now methods inside the HTTP mock is there is only one method which is having a respond, and within that we need to pass the one parameter which is called request. One parameter which is called request. Now returns an HTTP response for the given request. It returns the HTTP response for the given request. So this method is called by the Apex runtime to send the fake response. In order to implement this method, so we have a one method which is called as a respond request, and here it is basically the respond is going to return the HTTP response for the whatever the request that we are passing from the test classes. For that request, it is going to pass the response, and this method is called by the Apex runtime. That means test classes. Runtime is basically its test classes to send the fake response. And when that is completed, now in order to call the HTTP callout, we have to make it by using the test.set mock. By using the test.setMock from the test classes. We have to use this test.setMock. By using that, I can call this HTTP callout mock, and then I can pass the whatever the response is, whatever the request is that I can pass it. Now syntax will be for this, in order to implement the method, public HTTP response, and this is the respond method. Inside that we have a one parameter which is called as a request, and the data type for the request is a HTTP request, and this request is called provided by the actual test class. So basically what we are going to do right now is, now I have already a class which is implemented. I have a class which is already implemented. This is normal Apex class. This is normal Apex class. Now this class is already implemented. Now I need to implement a test class. This test class is to check the code coverage. The code coverage has to be greater than 75%. Greater than 75%. So whatever the lines of code that we have written here, everything I need to execute it using the test class. So if I run the test class, it should cover all this code and it should give me the 100% coverage or above the 75% coverage. Now, in order to do this, whenever I am calling the Apex class from the test class, there is a API call which is happening. Because this is a not normal class, it is a call out class, or the REST API class. Now here the integration is getting executed. Now just for my testing the logic, just testing my code, I do not want the actual real time integration. I do not want to call. Even Salesforce also does not want. If I do that, every time whenever the test class is executed, whether you are pushing the code from the one or to another or just for cross verifying whether it is running or not, in order to test that, every time we have to execute it. Now, in order to call actual API, from here, there is a third party is available here. So in order to call this, I don't want to call for the test classes. For that, what we need is, we are going to build a class here. We are going to build a class which is a HTTP callout mock. This is HTTP callout mock. We are going to build this. So instead of directly calling here, what we will be doing is, to the test class. Now here I'll be implementing a logic. From this logic, we will send a request to the whatever the HTTP callout is there. That means whatever the basic information is there, we will get the basic information. We will get the basic information from here to the test class, and then we will send a request to the HTTP callout. HTTP callout mock is going to send the response to the test class. Right? So I needed two test classes. This is also test class. But this is a HTTP callout mock test class. And this is actual test class for the Apex class. Now, this method, whatever this method is there, HTTP response.respond, HTTP response, and the method name is response, is going to implement it here. So here we are going to implement. In this test class, we are going to implement public, right? HTTP response. This is the written response. And then respond is the method. You cannot put any other method. You have to just put the same method which is called as a respond. And within that, we need a request, which is HTTP request. And the variable name is request. We need to pass this. And this is the method we will be implementing in the HTTP callout mock. Now, once this method is implemented, then we are going to call the HTTP callout mock. from the actual test class. If you want to call it from the actual test class, you have to use the test.setMock HTTP callout.class. This is the standard one. This is the class name. You can input any other. This is a standard keyword. This is standard keyword HTTP callout.mock.class. And then whatever your mockout class name, callout mock class name is there, HTTP callout mock class name is there. That's the same class name will be get executed. That's the same class name will be get executed. Now let's see how to implement. Now if you remember last time within two weeks, a class which is called as a verifone, which is called as a verifone. If I see here open resource, and then I'm going to class which we have implemented to cross verify the phone number. Right, this is the API which we have implemented. Now this API, what it does, it goes to the third-party system. We will be passing the phone number and the API key, and what are the responses there? Response, we will be storing this response here. From this response, we are storing the entire data into the wrapper class. Now this is the class that we have implemented for the verifying the phone number. Now, which third party it is? We have it. There is a verifone.io. .io is the third party. Verifone.io is the third party, and here is the documentation. So by looking at this documentation, we have implemented the integration, right? And this is the response how we received it. And that response we are storing into the phone response. We are storing into the phone response. Now, for this class, we are going to implement a, first I am going to implement HTTP mock callout, which is this one. First I need this one. Then only I can implement the test class. So let's implement the HTTP callout mock file new Apex class. Now let's say that this is verifone is the class name. Now, whenever we wanted to implement a HTTP callout mock, we have to, because that is a standard Salesforce has provided. Standard Salesforce has provided HTTP callout mock. Now, this is the interface. This is interface class provided by the Salesforce. This is a interface class provided by the Salesforce. Now, if I am implementing a test class for the HTTP callout mock, what I need to do is I need to inherit it. In order to inherit that, implement callout mock. Now this is the HTTP callout. Implement HTTP callout mock. By using this, we can implement it. Now here, whenever we are using the HTTP callout mock, it is giving an error. It is giving an error because we need to always use the HTTP callout mock, always has to be inside the is test. Inside the is test. Now this is the class name, implements, and then I'm going to provide the what are the HTTP callout mock is that is the HTTP callout. Now, instead of the public, if you want to use the global, you can also use the global. Now, we have a class name is verifone implements HTTP callout mock. HTTP callout mock. Now, inside this, as I have mentioned, we have to declare the method public HTTP response. Within that, I need to pass the parameter. Now, the syntax is public HTTP response, because that is the output we are going to get it. HTTP response, and the method name is always it has to be a response. You cannot add any other method name here, because that's the method name which is available for the HTTP callout. Now that method, and within this parameter is HTTP request. HTTP request, and then I need to pass the variable name is request. Variable name is request. Now this is method which is available. Now I have used the global. Let's use the global here. Let's use the global. Perfect. Now inside this, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? Basically, if I wanted to implement anything, what should I need to do? Now, in order to do inside this, what for which purpose we are implementing the HTTP response? Basically, I wanted to implement a fake response. I wanted to implement a fake response. That means I do not want to call the third party. Actual API integration, we do not want. In that case, we can use the fake response. Now, let's say here HTTP response, HTTP response, and then we are going to add a variable name response equal to new HTTP response. This is the declaration of the response. Now inside this response, I'm going to set response dot set header. Set header. Now I need a header. Also I need a response dot set body, because I need to set the fake response, and also response dot set status code. Response dot set status code. Now these three things are which are needed in order to build the fake response. Then finally, I'll be responding back to the whatever the response is there, I'll return the response. Return response. Now, what should be the header? Header has to be whatever we are calling it. For this one, it has to be a content, because the format, the response will be in the JSON format. So content hyphen type, content hyphen type, and then we have a response in the format of JSON. So that means it has to be an application slash JSON. Application slash JSON. Because the response which I'm going to get it is whatever this response is there, it has to be in the JSON response. It has to be inside the JSON response. Now let's copy this. Now this is the response that I'm going to set it inside the HTTP calloutMock. Now here I'm going to set the body. Now body I can directly set it here within the single port and passing the information. Now status, success, and the phone number is by default, that is the phone number. This is the valid phone type, and then I have a phone region, and then we have a country and the country code. Now this is the country prefix. Then we have it. Whatever the international number is there, that's the international number. And then E164, this is the standard one. And then we have it carrier. That's all. Now, in case if you do not want all of this, if you want to specify only few of them, you can specify the only whatever is needed. You can hard code the status. You can hard code the whatever the response body is there, you can hard code it. Now here status code has to be a 200. By default, it has to give me the 200. Now this is the HTTP calloutMock class. HTTP calloutMock class. Now We are done with implementing the HTTP callout mock. We are done with implementing the HTTP callout. Now, in this callout, if you want, you can write a different methods also. That's totally fine. Now, actual test class for the REST API. Whatever this API is there, we are going to implement the actual test class. File, new Apex class, whatever the class name is that the class name, and then we have a test. We have a test. Now for this, I'm going to specify @is test. @is test. Now here, actual test class. This is actual test class. In this actual test class, how we are going to call it? The main thing that we are going to use is test.setMock. Test.setMock. Using that, I need to. This is a two parameters are there. First parameter always has to be HTTP calloutMock.class. It has to be always HTTP calloutMock.class. And the second one is whatever your HTTP calloutMock name is there, you need to specify that mock name. Let's go ahead and see. This is the class. Now here I'm going to declare it static test method. Static test method, and let's say void. Now method name is, you can give any method name. Let's say test verify, and within this we are going to specify the test.setMock. Test.setMock. We have a set mock. Test.setMock. What are the two parameters are there? One is a system.interface type, and then I need to provide the whatever the mock name is there, I need to provide the mock name. Now interface type is HTTP calloutMock. Interface type is HTTP calloutMock. Callout.class. What is the mock name? Mock name is verify. I'm going to initialize it here, new verify mock. Now, I'm done with implementing the calling the mock. Now, whatever the set mock is there, I got the response. Whatever the response is there, I received the response and it is storing into the test.setMock. Storing into the test.setMock. Now, next I'm going to call actual class. Inside this actual class, we have a method name which is in the invoke verify API. Now this is expecting the parameter. The parameter I need to pass the phone number 966246061. Whether you pass an incorrect number or a correct number, whatever the phone number it might be, always it will return the response as 200. Always it return the response as a 200. Now, if you want to store this information, you can store it using the phone response. What are the phone responses there? There is this phone response. Phone response is in the method, right? This is the method. Now let's save this. Now, right now, there is nothing is available here. There is nothing is available. Does not exist. No, how did we execute this? Variable does not exist, it's saying. It's a phone response, right? It's a phone response. Within this, we have it. Say that I'm going to just define this. We're going to say no. Right now, the code coverage is 0%. Right now, code coverage is 0%. Now, if you get to see in the Apex class, validate account phone API. Validate account phone API, which starts with V. Now, right now, the code coverage is before we have run it. I have run it. So that's the reason it is showing 100%. But right now it is a 0%. Assume that it is a 0%. Now click on this run test. Now here, if I click on this code coverage, it says that 100% it is covered. 100% it is covered. Now here test classes, if you check this test, and for using this only, it executed the validate phone. 10 out of 10. That's the test class coverage. So what is happening here? Execution, how the execution is happening here? Now the execution is happening. First, it will get the response. First, it will get the response. Whatever the response is there, it will get the response. And then that means first it will try to execute the test.setMock. Test.setMock, and whatever the API is there, it calls the API. Now, whenever it is calling the API, it will check if it is calling from the test class. Do not actually call the endpoint. Do not call the endpoint because test class is always having the status code. This is how we implemented test classes for the REST API. So integrations. For integration, this is how we implement. Now, next one is, let's see, this is a HTTP calloutMock interface. This is HTTP calloutMock interface. Now using this, what we can do here, static resource callout. Next one is a static resource callout. Static resource callout. Now for using the static resource callout means in the Salesforce, now I can go to the static resource setup. Static resource. Now inside this static resource, I can upload the response. So far what we have done, I have given the response here. I have given the hard-coded response here. Now what I can do instead of hard-coding it, I can load the file into the static resource. I can load the file into the static resource and I can refer as a response to this. Instead of hard coding the response, I can refer that response to the, fake response. Whatever the response is there, I can give that fake response to the HTTP response instead of hard coding it. I can do that. Now, how can we do that? In case if you wanted to do that, you have to go to the static resource callout mock class. Static resource callout. Now, if you see in the documentation, static resource callout mock. Now, this static resource callout mock utility is used to specify the fake response. Fake response for testing the HTTP callouts. Now, how can I use this static resource callout mock? Now, in order to use this, we need to understand what are the methods we have it in the static resource callout mock. There are 4 methods. Set header. If you want to set the header, if you want to set the header. Now set header name is content-type and the header value is application/JSON if it is a JSON response. Now set the specified header name and the value for the fake response. Set static resource. Set static resource. Whatever the resource name is there, static resource name is there, that static resource name you have to provide it here. Set the specified static resource which contains the response body, And the next one is set status. Set status. What is the status that you wanted to set? By default, it has to be a 200. By default, it has to be a 200. And the last one is status code. Whatever here response status is there, the status, and here it is the status code. Status code is 200. Status is it? Just you have to specify the status, whether it is successful or not. Right? This is not mandatory HTTP status. The set status, if you are using the set status code, it's not mandatory to use the set status here. Right? These are the methods which are available inside the static resource callout. How can I use this static resource callout inside the Salesforce? In order to use that, the step one is I need to create a text file. I need to create a text file that contains the response of the body. Now, what I'll do is I'll go to the API documentation. Now, here, whatever the response is there, I'll get this response. Copy. Pad. Now, I'll open up the notepad here. Here I'm going to specify new. Right, this is a, let's assume that this is a very old file. I need very old dot JSON. Very old dot JSON. It has to be very old dot JSON. Right click on this, open as a notepad. And whatever the notepad is there, now paste that. As it is, whatever the response is there, paste that. We don't want to save it as a dot text. Do not save it. Let's delete this. Of this, and go to the notepad. Open the notepad. Paste it, file, save as. Let's go to the 24 session. Now here I'm going to specify variable dot JSON. Variable dot JSON. It's saved. Now I have a file which is saved inside the variable. Perfect. This is a JSON. Now that is the step one. Step one is copy the response. Whatever the valid response is there, copy that valid response and paste it onto the text and store that as a JSON.json. And the step two is to create a static resource for that text file. Now let's go to the static resource. Now click on the new button. Let's say the name of this validate phone. Choose the file. Very phone, click on open, and then here it is a public. Let's click on the save. Now I have uploaded the file into the static resource. This is application/JSON. Type is JSON. Perfect. That is the step two. Step three is I need to initialize the static resource callout. Now let's go ahead and implement the test class. I'm going to implement another test class by new Apex class. Let's say this is this class which I'm going to implement for the same class by new Apex class. Test class name, click on OK. Here I am going to specify this is test class @ is test. That is the first thing. And next, I need to have a method here. Let's say public static test method void. I am going to get the request token. Get the request token, or you can give any name like a test home. Inside this, I need to specify the static resource callout mock. Resource callout mock. Let's specify this, initialize this variable name is a mock, new set static resource callout mock. Static resource callout mock. Now in this mock, we have a multiple methods we have. Now the first one is, let's say I'm going to set the body. Say set static resource. Now you will not have a body here, you have a static resource. This is the mock.static resource, which I need a static resource name. Similarly, I need a mock.set status code. Also, I need a mock dot. What else I need? I need a header. I need a header. Now these three information I need. Now static resource name is, this is the static resource name. Validate phone. Let's give that static resource name in the single quotes. Let's click on it. Save. But before saving, I need to provide the code 200. And the key is I need to provide content type slash content type and the application slash JSON, which I have already implemented. So I'm going to copy that content type, comma, application slash JSON, application slash JSON. Now this is the static resource callout. This is static resource callout mock. Now before what we have done it, we have used the HTTP response. In the HTTP response, I use the set header, set body, and set status code. If I use a static resource, I need to use the static resource callout mock. And inside that, I need to specify the set static resource, which I need to provide the static resource name. And the status code is 200, status header is content type, application slash JSON. And the next one, which I am going to provide, test.setMock. This is mandatory. Whether you are going with the HTTP response or whether you are going with the static resource callout mock. Either you are going with the HTTP callout mock or static resource callout mock, you need to have a test.setMock. You need to have a test.setMock. Now in this case, what is the interface type? Interface type is as it is HTTP callout mock dot class. And here the mock is static resource mock. This is proper. And then I'm going to call the class. So this is what I'm going to call it. Click on save. Static resource, and this is the mock. I'm calling the mock here. And then calling the Apex class, calling the actual REST API class or normal interface class. Interface class. Let's save this. Now click on the run. test class. It has executed the validate it, that is the validate test. Now here it is the test validate account own API. Second time also it is executed the 100%. So two ways you can write it. Right, either you can use the HTTP callout mock interface, or else if you want a static resource, you can simply use the static resource callout mock. That's all for today. And we have done with the integrations part, interface part of it.